Alright, so this is gonna be a explanation video for a preliminary barrier skip setup, I guess, for the original Wind Waker. So, for those who haven't heard, the original Wind Waker now has a barrier skip, but it's very complicated and has to do with unloading things within the game so that the barrier, or excuse me, not unloading things, but like chewing up the game's memory so that the barrier fails to load when we go to Hyrule, essentially. So then obviously it just run past where it normally is. So to start off, I'm going to be doing some arrow duplication here on Windfall. I don't think I actually started this for like a few seconds, so over to here. There we go. This is a video that I'm going to be skipping around in to like explain what I do as it happens and to skip past all the parts that are not important. So right now I'm doing the arrow duplication stuff at this spot on Windfall because when you shoot the arrow here, you just instantly re-grab it, so you don't have to worry about accidentally losing arrows, and you can just side hop in a single direction. So this happens about 70 times. At some point, okay, yeah, so coming up here, when we try to do an arrow duplication, we're gonna get like the rejected item sound. Yeah, just like that. It was like a little dit sound. And once we get that, then I start pulling out the grapple hook. You want to pull out the grapple hook about 75 times after you hear the rejected button noise when trying to do arrow duplication. This is going to chew up a considerable amount of the game's memory, which it won't be able to get rid of, which is why this persists even though we're going through loading zones to get to Hyrule, of course. The arrows that we duplicated will not persist, but we need to do those duplications to set up being able to chew up this memory by the game failing to load in the grapple hook when we pull it out each time. So after we do that about 75 times, the game's probably going to start to lag a bit. That's just to be expected from what we're doing. And then we're going to super swim over to Dragon Roost Island to do more grapple hook duping. So just go like 4 times speed to quickly get over there. Alright. So now that we've arrived at Dragon Roost, this is where stuff kind of starts to get boring. We're going to pull out the grapple hook 400 times to start off with. So I will just kind of skip ahead here to doing this. Okay, so at some point I reached 400 invisible grapple hook poles, and then I went ahead and collected the rupees that are in the pond over here. This will free up a small amount of memory, which will then allow me to pull out the invisible grapple hook 200 more times to actually chew up memory as I want to. Since now the invisible grapple hook actually it's not chewing up a considerable amount of memory. Each grapple hook pole is only chewing up about 52 bytes of memory, which isn't a lot. So we need to do it considerably more now than what we did on Windfall for it to have any sort of meaningful effect. So after we collect the rupees, we want to do this 200 more times for a total of 600 invisible grapple hook poles on Dragon Roost Island. So just go ahead here. So once we finish those grapple hook poles, I get storage again, and I super swim all the way from Windfall to Forsaken Fortress 2. Now, it's important that you try to do this super swim like in a single shot. You don't want to stop at any islands, so that's why I start the super swim here, so that I can get some nice air refills. The reason that I say swimming to Forsaken Fortress 2 in one shot is important is because every time that I tried to do this and I stop at islands along the way, Forsaken Fortress 2 ends up in a state that I don't want it in, which can mean a number of different things. It can mean that either A, it crashed, which doesn't usually happen but can sometimes, B, the door at the top of Forsaken Fortress is still there, which is a little bit of a hassle to get around and usually results in accidentally soft locking or crashing somehow since we don't have chest storage to be able to get up there. So yeah, that's why I got the air refills here. And then once I figured I had enough speed, I made my way over there to Forsaken Fortress 2. I did accidentally hit the Northern Fairy Isle submarine in this attempt, but even with that, I was still able to successfully unload the door at Forsaken Fortress 2. So it didn't seem like this ended up mattering too much. Right, let's skip ahead here. Alright, yeah, so we reach Forsaken Fortress 2, do the typical Wind Waker dive to get under. And then skip forward here a little bit, we're swimming. So yeah, we can see lots of stuff's unloaded. I go over here to this corner so that I can then look up and see that there's no door at the top of Forsaken Fortress right here. So that's just my check to make sure that the door is unloaded. And then from here, I'm just gonna like do various leafing tricks to get around to where the door is. So I will fast forward through this once again. Right here, I think I stayed here for a little bit. Okay. Now, once we get up to the top, I again do more invisible grapple hook pulls. This time I do 300 of them, which will chew up about 15 more kilobytes of game memory before I enter into the loading zone. You want to be careful you don't chew up too much memory here, otherwise the loading zone itself is not going to work, because loading zones need a specific amount of free memory available to be able to actually take you to the next game map. So, just go through this. Alright, so after I did 300, I enter into the top of Forsaken Fortress 2 to the Helmarok cutscene and the Helmarok fight. Ideally, an optimal setup would also chew up the memory in such a way so that this cutscene would fail to load, in which case we wouldn't have to watch this cutscene or do Helmarok skip. So we can just skip past this. This is just me failing to do Helmarok skip a bunch of times. Okay, there we go. So after doing Helmarok skip, finally, I managed to get up to the door up here. And then we go through these cutscenes. We also need a specific amount of memory for these cutscenes to work. Because we don't want to... Because these cutscenes all rely, or getting to Hyrule relies on us being able to watch these cutscenes, so we don't want to, again, chew up too much memory before we get to Hyrule. Anyway, now that we're in Hyrule, the first thing that I want to point out is that when we're here, the grass in Hyrule on the backside is, like, actually loaded. In my experience, when the grass is not loaded, that usually means that, like, something screwed up and you're not going to be able to do barrier skip, because at least I have never been able to get the barrier to unload while the grass is loaded here. Or, excuse me, while the grass is not loaded. So that's just something to watch out for. Like, if I don't see grass when I get to Hyrule, that probably means that I would reset, for instance. Anyway, now that we're in Hyrule, we're gonna not do arrow dupes, but instead we're just simply going to shoot arrows into the void and have them knock against the barrier, because arrows that we shoot against the barrier and then fall down on this map, they don't actually despawn. So using this, we can get to a point where we can do the invisible grapple hook pulls without having to actually do any of the arrow duplication trick. Of course, since we don't know exactly how many arrows it'll take right here, I'm pulling out the grapple hook, you know, after shooting a few arrows at a time, until eventually I get to about 25 arrows shot, in which case I'm pulling the grapple hook after each individual arrow, because I do not want to use up too much memory with the arrows. I want to get just up to the point where the invisible grapple hook starts. So I think this time it took me 35 arrows. Yeah, so then I got invisible grapple hook again. And then this time we want to pull out the invisible grapple hook 400 times to waste about 20 kilobytes of game memory. So we'll just speed through that here, 400 times, and then load into the castle. Conveniently in the castle, there's actually 3 pots, which will give us a consistent 10 arrow drop, so I go around collecting those arrows here. One in that corner, the other in the opposite corner on the top floor, and then this pot right here. as an arrow drop. So now we have 30 arrows again, and we can go outside and do the arrow shooting. It's also important that the grass exists for this arrow shooting, because if there's no grass, then you're not going to be able to drop arrows, or the grass won't be able to drop any arrows for you when you run out. So if you need more than 30 arrows to get to the invisible grapple hook state, then you're not going to be able to do that without doing arrow dupes, which are kind of annoying. So we want to do as little, or as few arrow dupes as possible, I should say. But I think this time it took me 29 to get to the invisible grapple. Yeah, so started with 30, have one left, just took 29 arrows. Now we're going to pull out the grapple hook 400 times again, so we'll speed through this. Okay, and then once again, after I did it 400 times, I go into the castle to get more arrows, and then I come back out. And then we're going to repeat that same process of shooting arrows until we get to the invisible grapple hook state, and then re-getting arrows if it happens to be more than 30. But generally, as you do this more and more, the amount of arrows that it takes to get to the invisible grapple hook will gradually decrease. It'll either stay the same or it'll decrease. I don't think I've ever seen the amount necessary increase, unless something else happened to unload. So I come down here and I do this again, except this time, when I get to the invisible grapple hook state, I also got some magic. I only pull the invisible grapple hook 200 times, because that's all that's really necessary right now. And then, once we've pulled the invisible grapple hook about 200 times here, this is where we've essentially pulled out all the invisible stuff that we need to. And we have the game in a state where its memory is fragmented such that the barrier can be unloaded. And the way that we're going to do that is we're actually just going to go in and out of the Hyrule Castle loading zone, or the loading zones between Hyrule Castle and Hyrule. For some reason, going in and out of these specific loading zones, with doing this specific setup, will eventually deload the barrier, or should I say, have the barrier fail to load. So every time here, I shoot an arrow out into the distance, and if it, knocks against the barrier, then I know, okay, the barrier is still here. But, for instance, on this next reload, when I shoot the arrow into the void, you're going to notice that it's not going to hit anything. And that is the cue that we know, which means the barrier is unloaded. Now, I should mention that the amount of loads that it takes for the barrier to fail to load it can vary, wildly. Here, I got kind of lucky, and it only took 2 loads for the barrier to disappear. But sometimes I've had it take 20 loads for the barrier to disappear, so there's still more to this than... or there's more to this that we don't quite understand yet, which hopefully we'll be able to make consistent in the future. Also, the reason I'm going in and out of the loading zone between the backside of Hyrule and Hyrule Castle and not the front side where the barrier is more easily accessible is because I've only been ever been able to unload the barrier from this side of the castle using this specific method, right? No matter how many times I go in and out on the front of Hyrule, the barrier is still always there. It only seems to fail to load with this method if you come out the backside of Hyrule Castle. But, thankfully, we have tricks to get to the front side of Hyrule, even if we can't, or even if we appear on the backside. There is a very long zombie hover you can do to the Ganon's Castle loading zone, but obviously that zombie hover takes 7 minutes or something ridiculous, even if you're really fast at it. So instead, I opt to do this out of bounds trick. That'll get me onto the roof of the castle. I failed it this first time though, so I had to try it again. That bomb boost right there is... the timing for it is significantly later than you might think. You want to basically jump slash only a few frames before the bomb explodes. Because when you do it correctly, as I'm pretty sure I got it this time, you will end up on the railing, but inside, because you can't normally get here from just hopping up on the railing. And then we can leaf over to this waterfall, and then from here it's possible to do a precise bomb boost up to the roof up there. So I take out the bomb, I count until the brightest frame of the 7th flash, and then I do the bomb boost just like this. So now we're on the roof, and now there's not very much collision here, so we're just going to maneuver through everything. And then we want to leaf over to the front side of Hyrule. We also want to try to conserve as much magic as we can, though, because there's no guarantee of us getting a magic drop when we're going on the path to Ganon's Tower. So, yeah, that's kind of why I did like the little lineup thing, and I do the jump slash here to hopefully not waste enough magic. So now we're just going to walk past where the barrier should be, but clearly it wasn't there, so we can just gallivant on in to Ganon's Tower from here. And then typically either this piece of grass or these pieces of grass over here will have magic in them, so I got my magic drop so I could fly over the broken bridge to the tower. I mean, if you don't have enough magic to fly over the broken bridge, it's not too big of a deal. You can just do a short zombie hover to get into the loading zone. So, like, obviously a zombie hover from here is not as time-consuming as one from the start of the castle. Still would waste some time, though, so... yeah. But, yeah, that's the barrier skip setup that I have devised that seems to work most of the time. I've gotten it, like... 3 or 4 times on console now, so yeah. Anyway, this setup kind of sucks. I'm sure we'll figure out better setups in the future, but for now, this is what we have as a starting place. So, yeah, the full instructions and the unbroken video of me doing this entire thing are going to be linked in the description. So, yeah. Thanks for watching, and happy barrier skipping to anyone who wants to pull out the grapple hook 2,000 times. Be my guest.